What's especially puzzling is just a few blocks away, Marvel is absolutely killing it in terms of handling their cinematic universe with interconnected serialized storytelling. For example, let's take a look at the arc of Iron Man. Over the course of 8 movies, we get a pretty interesting story. He starts off being an arrogant, smarmy douchebag who rebels in how much money he can make from his destructive inventions. But after he's kidnapped, he learns firsthand the destruction he's been indirectly responsible for, and with the help of Yo Hinsen, he makes his first armor and escapes. He reforms his ways, vowing to never make weapons again, and to iterate on his armor to make up for all the lives he's ruined. In Iron Man 2, he's still a hero who thinks he's invincible until he confronts his own mortality when he learns his arc reactor core is killing him. After confronting the demons of his past and his own abrasive father, he forges forward and learns to let people like Pepper and James Rhodes into his life. Then comes the Avengers, where his brand of heroism comes in direct conflict with Captain America. Iron Man believes all problems can be solved with his genius. He doesn't need to worry about making the ultimate sacrifice or confronting his mortality again, when he can always outthink and outpilot any problem he faces, until he's confronted with a threat beyond his world with Loki and the Chitauri. So he's forced to make his self-sacrificing play to detonate the nuke in the wormhole, taking a lesson in the old-school heroism from his rival Steve Rogers. But we see the aftermath of his sacrifice in Iron Man 3, where the incident gives him PTSD, where he's afflicted with panic attacks and fear of an eventual alien threat. Something bigger than him. Something that he can't outsmart or outthink. To compensate for this, he continues to build more and more armored suits, but it's never enough. He can never provide the security to make himself feel safe. In the course of the film, he meets a little whiz kid who's kind of like a younger version of himself. But Tony still isn't ready to accept anyone in his life except for himself, and after a brief period of time with him, he ultimately leaves the kid behind, not ready to take him in his heart. The malignant tumor of his PTSD translates into Avengers Age of Ultron. He's managed to subdue his demons, but they haven't gone away, and his attempt to create a shield to protect the world with his Ultron project creates a malevolent AI that's the manifestation of all his worst aspects that nearly destroys the world. Now in his desire to help save people, he's managed to hurt more of them than ever before. The consequences come to roost in Civil War, where plagued with guilt he signs the Sokovia Accords, promising to regulate the activities of the Avengers, seeing his unregulated and unfettered global vigilantism as being part of the problem. His new neurosis of taking responsibility, driven by his latent PTSD, drives a wedge in his relationship with Captain America, ultimately breaking apart the Avengers and critically wounding his best friend. In his darkest moment, though, there is light. He meets another boy named Peter Parker who reminds him of himself. Peter, being a gifted science whiz kid, becomes a sort of foster son to Tony Stark. Unlike how before he was completely unwilling to accept a kid in his life and even entertain the idea of taking responsibility of mentoring or fatherhood, now after his failings have tempered his arrogance, Tony is finally ready to let down his wall, let someone else become the focus of his life that isn't him. And we see this in Spider-Man Homecoming as he gives a guiding hand and support to Peter Parker. This culminates in Avengers Infinity War, where after he proposes to Pepper Potts in Spider-Man Homecoming, he talks to her about wanting to have a family and having a kid, and feeling responsible enough to devote himself to something besides himself. But his biggest fear finally manifests when Thanos goes into action and he makes his biggest fear come to life. Not only does Tony lose almost everyone, but Peter Parker, the boy he swore to protect and guide, wastes away and turns into ash and dies in his arms, all while begging him that he's sorry and that he doesn't want to go. This hits hard because it's the dark culmination of an arc we've seen play out over the course of 8 different movies, all building up to this single moment. Even though we know Spider-Man will be back because Spider-Man Homecoming 2 is scheduled to come out next year, the cumulative weight leading up to this moment earns every dramatic beat. Because for whatever criticisms you might level at the MCU, it has been guided by a consistent and steady hand of super producer Kevin Feige, and because the creative decisions are not made on a whim, because longer story arcs are allowed to play out across several films, it works. That's all we want as an audience.